Minister, every year in Ireland about 290 women get cervical cancer. Almost 90 of those women die from it. In women aged 25 to 39 years, cervical cancer is the second most common cause of death due to cancer. It's the responsibility of individuals, families, communities and the state to do everything possible to drive this number down. This week is European Cervical Cancer Prevention Week, and an important week to highlight that cervical screening is one of the best ways to help protect from cervical cancer. Recognising the importance of this protective measure, the state provides free, regular cervical screening tests to those aged between 25 and 65. I, like thousands of others in Ireland, will be used to receiving the letter informing us that our screening is due. I cannot emphasise how important it is to make this appointment. We're all busy and rushing around, but this screening is a vital part of healthcare. When discussing this area, it's important to acknowledge the cervical check scandal. The tragic death of Vicky Phelan is the symbol of this massive and unforgivable state failure. Her dedication and unyielding spirit brought this scandal to light. We now know that 206 women had developed cervical cancer after having a misdiagnosed cervical check smear test. And of these, 162 were not informed of the initial incorrect results. We're still feeling the impacts of this scandal, and while I strongly disagree with the government's handling much of this matter, including the adversarial tribunal, the important thing for us as public representatives now is to highlight the reforms of the system and the absolute necessity of regular screening. There has been reform of the cervical screening programme because of Vicky Phelan and many other women who became involved in the cervical check issue. In Dr. Gabriel Scally's final review of the implementation changes to the cervical check screening programme, he said women can have confidence and should take full advantage of the cervical screening programme. It has saved many women's lives and will continue to do so. Nonetheless, there are issues raised in the scandal that need addressing. Open disclosures are crucial to help prevent the likes of the cervical check scandal in the future. The Patient Safety Bill is the main legislative reform to change the culture within the health service through a system of mandatory open disclosure of serious patient safety incidents. However, that bill is moving disgracefully slow given its significance. It was introduced in 2019 under the previous government, and there was a 9-month delay between committee stage and report stage. This legislation needs to be progressed. Minister, this bill needs to be prioritised and advanced immediately. The other major issue which goes to the heart of the cervical check scandal is the commitment for a national screening laboratory. The HSE response to the final Scally review notes that this lab has been commissioned. However, there is a long delay from it being completed. Screenings are still being sent to the US for analysis, and while we're assured by experts that this is an effective and reliable system, there is still the government commitment and the public desire for a national cervical screening laboratory fully staffed with appropriate medics and scientists. This is absolutely essential. So can the Minister provide an update on this important matter? Although there are outstanding issues from the cervical check scandal, it is essential that all public representatives align and advocate for everyone to avail of these really important screening processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Laska Herlock, and thank you, Deputy Kearns, for raising this important topic here this morning. And I'm taking it on behalf of Minister Donnelly. So, as you were aware, this week marks Cervical Cancer Prevention Awareness Week. And this is a significant initiative in women's health, and it is the first time the world has committed to eliminating a cancer as a public health problem. It is a perfect opportunity to reaffirm the government's commitment to eliminating cervical cancer as a public health problem for women in Ireland. Earlier this week, I was delighted to see that the HSE launched Ireland's roadmap to reach the global targets set by the WHO. In Ireland, we are already well on the way, and we are really in a strong position to meet the targets. This is due to a large part of the introduction of cervical screening and improvements in early diagnosis, as well as our HPV vaccination programme. The incidence and mortality rates from cervical cancer are declining. We are all united in our desire to eliminate this cancer, importantly, which is within reach of us. We are one of a small number of countries with the best-in-the-class testing offering HPV screening, and this is more effective than previous screenings. As well as the screening, we are also a highly effective HPV vaccination programme, and last year the Minister announced an extension to the programme, the Laura Brennan HPV vaccination catch-up programme. And it's important for me to acknowledge the role that Senator Martin Conway from Clare played in this. He raised it with myself more than 3 times in the last 2 years inside in the Seanad, and he's been a really strong advocate. And this programme now offers an additional opportunity to those who were previously eligible for the HPV vaccine, but for whatever reason did not get the HPV vaccine. The Minister was pleased to show his strong commitment to the elimination of cervical cancer and has invested through the Women's Health Fund over 750,000. This is for the strategy, information, communication campaigns and the new HPV vaccination catch-up portal. Included in this funding is a research element to explore the use of self-sampling of cervical cancer, which may assist in understanding and assessing barriers in marginalised groups when providing cervical screening. Importantly, the National Cancer Registry of Ireland has reported since the introduction of cervical screening in 2008, the incidence and mortality rates for cervical cancer are declining. Women who attended screening were more likely to be diagnosed at an earlier stage. And we know from some population are less likely to take up invitations to screening. Cervical Check are committed to identifying any barriers to participating and working to overcome the Cervical Check regularly run targeted campaigns to raise awareness amongst women over 50 that screening is still for them and the importance of taking up screening invitations. The screening at regular intervals is one of the best ways to reduce the risk of developing cervical cancer. It is exciting that we are one of the leading nations in advance in cervical cancer prevention and that we are continuing to see our programme adapt and evolve. The WHO Europe Regional Director Hans Klug has acknowledged and welcomed Ireland's new roadmap and our commitment, saying we look forward to Ireland as a trailblazer in achieving this ambitious goal. Finally, and most importantly, I would urge members here today to inform everybody, particularly women, parents, young adults, to get informed about the causes of cervical cancer and to understand how HPV vaccination, cervical screening, early treatment and symptoms awareness are the key tools to fight against cervical cancer. To know cervical cancer is preventable and curable if detected early and managed effectively. And the HSE are currently running an extensive social media and communications campaign to highlight that. I am conscious, Deputy, that you have raised issues there that I have not addressed in the script, of which I will bring back to Minister Donnelly about the open disclosures, please, about the laboratory here in Ireland. So I will bring that back. It isn't in the script, but it needs to be addressed, as you quite rightly say.
Thanks for your response, Minister, and your commitment there. I appreciate that, just to get an update on where the laboratory is at. And you're also right to highlight that awareness and accessibility are essential to the success of the programme and ultimately to the prevention of deaths. And the Department of Health and the HSE must continue to promote and explain the relevance of the service. It must include multifaceted campaigns to reach everyone between the ages of 25 and 65. And you mentioned social media initiatives being important to reach younger cohorts, and we need easy-to-read information to improve accessibility and translations just to reflect the diversity of people living in Ireland. And on this particular issue, I'm glad you're taking the question instead of the Minister for Health, but accessibility is an issue that is continuously raised at the Disability Matters Committee, especially around women's health. Physical barriers around entering GP surgeries or health centres are still common, or the complexity of transport remains just a massive obstacle for disabled people or people with disabilities accessing healthcare. It's only right that the screening service is free. The government needs to look at ensuring that there are still no financial barriers to anyone who needs to access the service, because again, it's something that disabled women have highlighted at the committee. Often with a disability, you live in fixed and limited incomes that have to pay for taxis and other transport to avail of the services, and sometimes that involves delaying appointments, not making the appointments. So we just need to do everything possible to avoid those situations. While we appreciate the importance of the service, there are more steps the government and the HSE can take to ensure greater uptake and accessibility. So I urge you to look at those and to engage with all stakeholders to develop a truly universal, free and accessible service. And it was Disabled Women Ireland in particular who spoke really strongly about that at the committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Deputy, for giving me the opportunity to come in on that particular piece. And I think what you've raised there is really, really important. And I do think where there's particular campaigns being run and women do not have the opportunity to participate in, there should be no barriers. There should be no barriers when it comes to transport. We do know that when it comes to accommodation around access into primary care, they all need to be addressed, and there shouldn't be any of those barriers. But particularly where a lady cannot access a particular service due to, for whatever reason, I think we have learned from COVID. We have in-reach models and we have outreach models. So there should be no preventable opportunity from that person being supported, particularly when it comes to screening. But to do with all health issues, there should be in-reach and outreach options available, and transport, as one matter that you have raised there, shouldn't be the sole reason you should not be able to access it. I think it's awful important, if you feel that there's barriers, to actually identify your barriers, communicate the barriers, and then we need to actually address it from a community public health point of view, because that's what it's all about. And again, thank you for raising this on the week that's in it. Can I pay particular testament to Laura and Laura Brennan's family. I again want to acknowledge the work that Minister Donnelly has done along with Senator Conway on this particular issue, and for the families who have lost loved ones. For the families who have lost loved ones, there's a lot of issues that you've raised there, and as a female, that I believe strongly myself need to be addressed in a timely fashion. It should not be adversarial by any manner or means. There should be the open disclosure. That legislation should come before us, and at the same time, we have the best trained people in the country. We should look at having our own screening in-house and on our own soil. Thank you, Deputy.